Turning to tonight's special report, what is at stake in this Supreme Court fight? President Trump set to make his third pick for the high court. If confirmed, Donald Trump will have put more justices on the court in one term than either Presidents Obama and Clinton did in two. Now, part of that's arbitrary luck. Clinton faced 2 vacancies in his first 2 years in office, then none in the next 6. Justices, of course, decide when they want to retire, or Mother Nature decides when they pass away. But part of it also was Republican hostage-taking, as Mitch McConnell stole a lawful appointment from Obama in 2016. That's -1, and of course added it to Trump. That's +1. But this fight over Ginsburg's seat is not at all the same as the last 2 of Trump's nominees. This is, and if you understand nothing else, understand this. This is the first time that Donald Trump can alter the balance on the court because he is replacing a liberal vote with now a Trump vote. That's different than the last 2 vacancies, which were justices appointed by Republicans. And that's one of the reasons that so many progressives view this as a time for potentially extraordinary action. Now, many different issues, of course, hang in the balance. But if you ask the late Justice Ginsburg, she would tell you that her work on equality, feminism, and sex and gender discrimination are some of the most crucial advancements that she made in her life in law, many of which turn on the seemingly obvious, basic, fundamental principle that people are equal, so women have the same rights and opportunities as men. Ginsburg's work as a judge, her jurisprudence, applied that basic principle to the workplace, to financial independence, and to women's health and women's bodies. So she was a vote to uphold, for example, abortion law when she joined the High Court, and which remains the law of the land today. Roe versus Wade protects, for example, a woman's right to choose, and the later cases that grew out of it in the law limit and control how the government, federal or state, interferes with any burdens on that legal choice. Now, before the Supreme Court ruled on Roe in the early 1970s, over 30 states in America banned abortion. It was just illegal. That is the history and the reality. And that is very relevant tonight because Donald Trump's allies are demanding that he replace Ginsburg with a legal anti-Ginsburg. Now, let me tell you in plain English exactly what that means. They want someone who not only personally or religiously opposes abortion, but someone who will rule to make it illegal in America. Okay? So before we go any further, it is worth hearing and understanding the reality of what women face in that situation, like before 1973. And as a newscaster, I have to warn you, some of this is graphic. But editorially, we think that's all the more reason to reckon with it right now before U.S. politics and the U.S. government potentially pushes the U.S. back into this reality again.
Someone gave her a hanger abortion, perforated her uterus and her bowel. She was in septic shock and she died.
He said, I'm not going to give you any anesthetic. And he said, if you scream, they will hear you.
Got on her kitchen table and watched as she inserted a plastic tube that had been boiling in a pot of water.
The doctor had actually left in tissue and had caused massive infection in this whole area of my body.
Your uterus is probably so scarred that you'll never be able to get pregnant again.
A lot of them were afraid to go to the ER, and so they just bled out.
Medical experts and doctors stress how those conditions were terrible for the patients, procedures without the required safety, without antibiotics, sometimes without doctors. And to be clear, this was common. Hundreds of thousands to 1 million women estimated annually getting what were then illegal abortions that way in the 50s and 60s. And the Supreme Court ended all that by ruling there's this constitutional right to choice. Now, in the law, that's a national holding. So that is the baseline. And then the court basically used its jurisprudence to also respect that the states have a role in regulating and defining the details of that with that baseline. That's an approach that the Supreme Court refined further in 1992 in a landmark case called Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And that was authored by the first woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court, a Republican, Sandra Day O'Connor, who noted that there are strong and legitimate religious objections to this practice, while also noting in her ruling that women are entitled to their liberty under the U.S. Constitution.
That new Supreme Court ruling on abortion giving the states even greater power.
But does not overturn the central holding of the Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion.
Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who wrote the decision, said that while abortion may be repugnant to some, our obligation is to defend the liberty of all.
The liberty of all. Now, the very next year, Ginsburg became the second woman on the court, where she was a key leader in the voting bloc on these issues, joining opinions that struck down laws that made other efforts, like a Nebraska law that failed to protect the lives or health of pregnant women, which she wrote about and said that it instead chipped away at the private choice shielded by Roe and modified by the 92 ruling that I just mentioned, Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Now, as the anti-abortion movement continued to push those kinds of laws to narrow access, especially access for poor women, Ginsburg would dissent and call out her colleagues on that court for alarming steps that simply didn't take those rulings that I just mentioned, those previous rulings, seriously. And then within the last 5 years, she was the crucial fifth vote halting a Texas law that could effectively ban most abortions in that entire state. And just this summer, she was again that fifth and crucial vote for a similar measure that would have restricted access in Louisiana. And as a justice, she spoke bluntly about what she thought those laws aimed to do. She argued they discriminated not only on gender, but on class by specifically targeting poor women in America.
All of the restrictions that we see in states like Texas operate only against poor women, the people who are far from the big cities and couldn't afford to take a day off from work. Restrictive abortion laws operate against poor women, and that's the sad story.
And that's the sad story that she tried to patrol, indeed joining sometimes with Republicans for that block. But that fifth vote right now, tonight, I can tell you, as a matter of fact, by her death, that fifth vote is missing. That means if last year's case came right back right now, it would just deadlock at 4-4, and a new justice can reverse those rulings entirely if that conflict goes back to the court. And this is the confirmed strategy of many conservative groups and some states to limit abortion access, making it, for example, a reality right now that there's just one clinic per state in 6 different states in America. Then they keep pushing legal cases until the court will join a strategy that effectively makes abortions impossible for any non-rich person to get or unavailable, if not technically illegal, in entire regions.
Missouri will become the first American state to go completely dark in terms of legal abortion providers since the Supreme Court ruled in Roe versus Wade.
You can imagine our anxiety level here at the clinic.
It's extremely devastating to think that that is a real possibility here. A lot of these women will have nowhere to go.
We go through this over and over again as abortion providers. So, sometimes I'm hard on myself and I ask, why do you act like you're so shocked?
That's what's already going on. And then legally, what is already almost gone becomes potentially a path to completely obliterate it on the books. Now, Donald Trump has thus far impacted the court with those 2 swaps I mentioned, Trump conservatives replacing traditional conservatives. But those changes didn't fundamentally reshape the voting bloc on this issue, which is what can happen if a certain type of conservative replaces Ginsburg, something she was very aware of when she offered this warning 5 years ago.
This is something central to a woman's life, to her dignity. It's a decision that she must make for herself. And when government controls that decision for her, she is being treated as less than a fully adult human responsible for her own choices.
That's how she laid it out. That was her life's work, and it's part of what she did on the court. As mentioned, there are genuine and strongly held beliefs on both sides of this issue. Religion courses through so much of it. But if you take this seriously right now, you have to look at the implications. Of course, we live in a world where you might say, okay, Ari, every other night we're being told this is the big one, this is the big fight, this is the most important X ever. But this is actually the most pivotal potential change on equality, on the rights of women in America, more so than anything else that Donald Trump has done or may ever do. And you have to ask yourself, and we're going to get into this tonight, why is it that people who talk about precedent and conservatism and upholding American traditions turn to radicalism on the issues that they choose? It would be conservative and precedent-oriented to maintain this balance in the law that I've just described to you that's operated now since Roe. And it would be something else indeed, something radical, to jam through this justice to radically overturn it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.